Thank you for your patience. We're all set now.
Chair Vegas, don't forget to use your microphone.
The reminder and. Okay, very good. Thank you, Robert, for that. Okay, welcome everybody to the, let's see, today is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. Effectively our second meeting for the Capital Area Regional Tolling Authority, and to kick us off, if Vice Chair Dante Early will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's awesome. Did I just read that? All right, so with that, we would start with roll call, Madam Clerk.
All right, just a quick reminder for the microphones, the green means you are live, red means you are muted. And I'll go ahead and do roll call now. Director Seves.
Here.
Chapman.
Here.
Desmond.
Here.
Vice Chair Early.
Here.
Chair Villegas.
Here.
Ex officio member Click.
Here.
Deloria.
Here.
Liaison. There we go. Guerra. Absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, for that. And so we want to welcome newest member Supervisor Desmond to the CARTA board. So welcome. If you wanted to say anything, or if not, you're good to go.
I'm good to go.
Oh, man.
Sure, thank you.
Very good. Okay, so so Robert, under disclosures, do I need to announce that, or is that just sort of a self-disclose in the event that there are any to be had? Not sure.
This
quite.
is just a new procedure that we added, as well as you saw at the SACOG board meeting this last year, or this last month. We're looking at ensuring that board members are aware if there's contracts coming before this board, that they would disclose those and not participate in those votes.
Very good. Okay, so noted. Okay, very good. So items 1 and 2 are consent items. We have both the approval of the minutes of the February 15th meeting, as well as the legal services disclosure. We have that in front of us. Are there any questions on either of the items under consent? Seeing none. All right, well, then we need a motion to approve the 2 consent items. Oh, yes. Do we, is there any public comment? You know what? I'm sorry, we have to go back. Robert, under public comments, I know you
General
received
public
one.
communications.
Yeah, you do have one comment.
Correct. Under general public communications, we have a public comment from citizen Ross Parrish that he wants me to read into the record.
Good.
I'll do that now.
Yep, please.
Dear CARTA board, dozens of experts have made clear that YOLO 80 goes against Caltrans's aim to make an efficient transportation system that reduces VMT. I travel often between the Bay Area and Sacramento. I choose the train despite the added time because it is low stress and I can bike, get a ride, or take SAC-RT from the station. My friends who drive between Sacramento and Davis for social gatherings do so despite the traffic because schedules and last mile connectivity do not work for them. To silence those of us without cars, the project makes vague references to transit improvements. By my estimations, alternative 4B contains 2. The idea that buses could be prioritized in the lane and the expansion of park and ride. There is a painful irony in calling additional parking a transit improvement. Park and rides ensure that even people who use transit must still drive part way. It is unfathomable that someone already driving west from Sacramento would choose to stop, exit the vehicle, and get on a bus. The added time would be longer than any traffic jam. As for buses using the lane, this is wishful thinking unless CARTA satisfies the latter of the following demands. The $105 million must be repurposed entirely to 1, add transit service at Capital Corridor stations, and 2, establish all hours, every 20 minutes, YOLO bus service in a carpool-only lane. Do not expect people like me to quiet down unless CARTA, Caltrans, and YOLO TD can provide a real transit improvements to this vital corridor. Ross Parrish. And that ends the comment.
Okay, very good. So that'll be part of the record. Thank you, Robert, for that. All right, so back to the 2 consent items. So if there are no questions or comments, we need a motion to approve the 2 items.
Early moves.
Early moves with a second by. All right, Chapman second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries unanimously.
And for the record, there is no public comment for the consent.
Very good. Thank you for that reminder, Robert, as well. Okay, that takes us to our action items. Action item number 3 is the 2024 CARTA meeting schedule. That is Kathleen, is that, yep, no.
Yes.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Villegas, Vice Chair Early, and members of the CARTA board. I apologize for not being there in person for our second meeting as a tolling authority. So item 3 before you is an action item to adopt a new meeting schedule for 2024. As you may recall, at the February CARTA board meeting, we adopted an original 2024 meeting schedule that had this board meeting quarterly. Since then, the staffs of the partner agencies have determined that bi-monthly meetings are probably needed to be able to advance the work that needs to happen over the next fiscal year to keep the YOLO 80 project on schedule and help prepare our region for tolling. So staff have developed a proposed board meeting schedule for the remainder of the year, which has us having 2 meetings in a row, the May meeting that we're currently at, and a June meeting to catch us up to a bi-monthly schedule through the remainder of the year. The June meeting is off schedule, and then the August meeting is between the SACOG Transportation Committee and Land Use and Natural Resource Committees due to a conflict with the SACOG Funding Round Board Working Group, of which some of the directors on this board serve. But the remainder, the August proposed CARTA board meeting and December proposed CARTA board meetings are at the usual time after the SACOG board meeting. I'm happy to take any questions and staff recommend approval.
All right, very good. Thank you for that, Kathleen. Are there any questions regarding the proposed schedule going forward? Seeing none, moving right along. We need a motion, right? We need a motion for that to,
Motion.
Early seconds.
all right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we now have a schedule going forward that takes care of item 3, and item 4 is the,
For the record, there's no public comment on item
No, of
3.
course, I
That's
apologize.
I was like,
yes. Robert said there, yeah, okay. Thank you, Robert, for jumping right in, moving right along. Okay, approving the budget for the fiscal year 24-25. Let's see who is presenting that.
It is Kathleen
Kathleen
again,
as well. Very
Chair
good.
Villegas.
Come back, Kathleen.
Yes, I don't know that I introduced myself in the last item. So for anyone who's joining us, I'm Kathleen Hanley. I'm a principal planner on the transportation team at the Sacramento Area Council of Governments and helping to staff CARTA's activities. So item 4 is also an action item to approve a budget for fiscal year 2024-2025 for CARTA. As you know, CARTA was initiated earlier this year, but up until July has sort of done its activities without an adopted budget. So this would be the inaugural budget for CARTA's activities moving forward, beginning July 1 and concluding June 30th of next year. The budget is summarized on this slide, but there's a detailed budget spreadsheet attached to the staff report. So total revenues are $1.3 million, with all of those revenues coming from a loan from SACOG's managed fund. More details on that loan are included for board consideration as part of item 5. Total expenses also come to $1.3 million, and those are split into 2 general categories. One is administration, which includes the work that SACOG does to administer CARTA, including running these board meetings, clerk time, processing invoices, procurement, legal services. And so all of those sort of day-to-day operations of an agency are detailed as administration expenses in the proposed budget. And we have those split here on this slide between staff costs and non-staffed costs. Similarly, the remainder of the budget is split up as the toll program. So this is the work that the transportation staff at SACOG do to administer CARTA as a tolling authority and includes some staff costs, but the bulk of those funds are going towards a consulting contract for $700,000, which is up for board consideration as part of item 6. Happy to take any questions.
All right, so before we take public comment, are there any initial questions by any? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Kathleen. I just want to be clear. So for this budget, completely funded by a loan from SACOG, which presumably will be approved in the next item, this will cover our director costs, what would otherwise be our director costs until CARTA starts receiving its own revenue to absorb those costs, correct, on the administrative side?
Yeah, so the intention behind the budget is really before there's operations, right? The administration of this programmatic CARTA operation is funded through this loan. And so this is for the first fiscal year. As Kathleen mentioned, the consultant that we're looking at hiring really is going to help us map out, one, what are the things that CARTA needs to do until a toll facility and the operations are happening? And then two, what are maybe some of those costs that we're going to have to incur? So certainly we'll bring back another budget. There won't be revenue in the second year. And so that'll be something that CARTA has to consider, but we think this covers all the costs that are necessary for the next fiscal year entirely. There's project-specific costs with YOLO 80, but this is for the program of CARTA and all the things that it needs to do to set up this regional entity.
Okay, and that the RFP that we'll be discussing later, that won't cover any of those administrative costs in
No,
terms of, okay,
separate.
just want to be clear. Okay, thank you.
Good question there, Station. Okay. Yes, jump in.
So I just, on the council side of things, I just want to make sure that I'm fully understanding. I know that's something that we talked about. There is the general counsel that we'll get from SACOG's lawyer in regards to all things kind of like the meeting and bylaws and that sort of thing. But on negotiating contracts and some of those other things, particularly when potentially it might be with SACOG, is there funds for an outside counsel here? I'm looking at contracts counsel. I just want to make sure that's what that's capturing.
Sure, yeah. So obviously in the infancy of CARTA, right, we don't have a clear sense of what the costs are, but conservatively, based on kind of what we've spent on other things, we think that this is the budget that you will need. And of course, it's a board decision. So you can tap any of these line items to hire counsel if outside counsel is needed. This specifically is contemplating the cost when we've talked to other tolling entities around the state where they do these large RFPs. They're very complicated, and so they need to rely on expertise. And the council we have that helps us prepare those for SACOG has that expertise. And so that was what we envisioned here. But if there's an agreement between SACOG and CARTA, you can always hire outside counsel, and there's budget here for you to do so.
Perfect. So within these line items, there is a little bit of wiggle room as we approach something that, again, there's a lot of unknowns within it.
Certainly, we can, and something we do at SACOG, which is obviously at a much larger scale, but we can bring, financial updates throughout the year to kind of let you know. And if there's a specific thing we're anticipating, we can ensure that we're, reserving the funds for that. I think just stepping back and looking at this, I think there's other areas where the budget where we've been conservative so that we have some flexibility there. So I think there's enough space for the board to have that flexibility.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, on something else, you don't mind, Mr. Chair. When will this board make decisions, and maybe this is part of the RFP and the consultant we'll be hiring in terms of how we're going to be spending future toll revenue and kind of, I guess, parameters around that? Is it premature to have that discussion now, or we wait till we bring a consultant on to help us?
I'm going to turn to Kathleen on this.
Okay.
For that one.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Director Desmond. So ultimately, CARTA will need to adopt a toll revenue expenditure plan for any of the toll facilities within our system, including YOLO 80, chiefly as the one that we're bringing to construction. So at some point, once we have a better sense of what estimated revenues are, and once lots of policy decisions have been made that will influence what those ultimate revenues are made by this board, we'll bring before you a draft. There's a whole process using public outreach to determine what happens with the excess of those funds. So a lot of the work that the contract is proposed to under item 6 is to get CARTA and our region set up to be able to make that kind of decision in the next couple of years.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. I'm sorry for asking questions as a new person
No,
here, but I know
not
that's
at all.
going to be one of the, that's going to be, the public will be paying very close attention to that. Yeah.
One more. And so I'm sure I'm missing it. And so I'll ask and then you could just point it out. It's right there. Director Early. Is the loan amount is for $1.3 million.
That's right.
It looks, I think, and maybe I'm just missing it. And that's exactly how much we need in order to operate. I thought during one of our SACOG meetings, we had actually talked about the fact that there might be interest charged on it. Is
That's right. So we're.
Thank you. See, that's what I was like, it's
that-
somewhere.
No, that's okay.
Point
right.
it out for me, please.
Yeah, so in the staff item, we highlighted the estimated interest. It's actually in the next item, the loan agreement. And so that's where
Oh.
you're kind of missing it, right? So
Okay.
that's kind of all the terms of the loan. But yeah, to jump ahead, essentially, we are looking at, obviously the revenues are what is available to CARTA to spend. Over time, it's uncertain exactly when the year will be when the loan is repaid. And so it'll be based on the interest rates that the LAIF charges for any particular year there. But we're estimating it's, I don't actually have it right in front of me here.
No,
either,
it's
but
okay. I
it's on
pulled
the
it up.
next
You just
page,
said, just scroll down a little bit more.
Yeah,
Dr. Early, and you'll
thank
see
you.
it.
We're helping each other out. Yeah, about 1.6 to 1.7 in total over the
Okay.
life of the loan.
Thank you.
Sure.
Director.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Director Desmond's comment. I think, figuring out that obviously, I think my understanding, this board has basically the sole responsibility to decide how those extra dollars outside of O&M, right, how it's spent, but also very specific in the EIRs, but in the EIR for the YOLO 80, it clearly lays out legally what YOLO TD are moving forward, what they can be spent on. And then I think within those parameters where we'll have that sole discretion to decide, but the EIR also lays out even here, right, the VMT, how that money should be spent to reduce that. So there are guardrails in there already, but I do think we need to have that discussion as a board, because as other regions come on and SAC comes on like that, right, we're going to be able to need to have that conversation so that everyone is on the same page.
Yeah,
moving
yeah, I
forward.
think that's only fair. And I've got some suggestions for that. I was going to bring it up a little bit later, but because I think under item 6, it actually allows for a little more conversation and discussion around that item. So perfect, tee it up. So I guess, I'm sorry, Sergio, yeah, go ahead.
No, just a quick question. I think it's already been brought up, but to clarify, this expenditure plan gets us through the first fiscal year, is that correct? And then this consultant that is part of this expenditure plan, they're gonna help us develop a funding plan between now and when full revenues start to come in, right?
Correct, yeah, and that's, yeah. So that's, I think that covers it. Are there any other questions before we ask for any public comment?
If I could, Chair Villegas, I
Yeah.
neglected to provide the information on the next slide. So if I could get slide 5, I know there was a question from one of the directors about sort of how the staff costs that SACOG is doing to administer CARTA shake out between SACOG staff. So I provided the estimates here of how many hours over the course of the fiscal year for different individuals within SACOG's administrative and operations teams and its transportation team to support toll program work. These are, of course, estimates, but I think to give you a sense, at the lowest end, sort of between 1% and 2% of someone's work over the course of a year, and at the upper end, 20% of someone's work over the year.
Very, yeah, okay, very helpful, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, so if there are no other initial questions, we'll bring it back for further discussion. Robert, is there anybody that has?
There's no public comment on this
No
item.
public comment? Okay,
I just my last question on this, just especially thinking about staffing. One of the things we had talked about offline that I talked about with staff was the potential that YTD staff might be needed. Is that I don't see it covered, and I don't think I saw it discussed either. Is that because you guys went back and you're like, no, we're positive, we're not gonna maybe need staffing or support?
So I can start to answer perhaps. So when the 3 agency partners have met to discuss kind of how to get CARTA launched, we made a joint decision that SACOG would take the lead in administering CARTA. And so these are the costs specific to that. Obviously, YOLO TD is going to have a lot of work to do. That's not funded through this loan from SACOG.
Got it.
Theirs is very specific to the project. So that's kind of how we're teaming this up. We'll talk in the future too about Caltrans' role and the things they're doing that they're going to fund as well for themselves to participate in this.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
sure. Yeah. All right, so with that, if there is no public testimony and we did not receive any, and there are no other questions, then we do need a motion to move forward on this item.
I'll move approval.
Early seconds.
All right, Desmond's motion, early seconds, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that motion carries unanimously as well. That's item 4. Item 5 is the loan agreement with Sacramento Area Council of Governments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is also my item. Item 5 is an action item to approve a loan agreement with SACOG pursuant to the budget that the CARTA board just adopted to generate that 1.3 million in revenue to cover CARTA's first year expenses. So staff's recommendation is that the board approve the loan agreement and delegate authority to the chair to sign the agreement on behalf of CARTA with SACOG. As a note, this loan agreement went before the SACOG board at their April meeting as part of their budget process and was approved by SACOG. The staff report includes some information to provide sort of the justification that we believe CARTA will be able to repay this loan on the repayment schedule that SACOG has outlined. So there are estimates related to toll revenue that have been provided by Caltrans through their contractor through the development of the YOLO 80 project through something which is called a traffic and revenue analysis. And so those estimates, of course, are at a very high level, and YOLO TD is going to be pursuing some work to make a finer grain estimate on what those toll revenues will be. And there, as we've discussed on the last item, lots of decisions that this board will make that will ultimately influence what those final revenue numbers will be. So this is all to sort of say those are very much estimates, but they all exceed the estimated yearly repayment of $300,000 or so that is in the SACOG loan agreement. We've also provided an estimate here for how much the ultimate repayment of this loan will be between $1.6 and $1.7 million. But as Eric noted on the previous item, that depends on how long it takes CARTA to repay the loan and what the interest rates are ultimately at that time. Happy to take any questions, and staff does recommend approval.
Very good. Thank you for that, Catherine. So, any initial questions by anybody?
Trying to do some quick math.
Take your time.
It's about, I think, 4.5% interest is what we're assuming based on current rates, but hopefully for lots of reasons in the economy, that's a lower rate in the next couple of years, but that's based on current rates.
Right, Robert, any public testimony on this item?
There's no public comment.
All right, no public comment. So we'll bring it back for further discussion, comments, questions, or a motion.
Yeah, and I would have is it a safe assumption that next fiscal year, there's not gonna be any revenue, so there'd be a second loan that's tied into this one, or how are they, is there thought or a process looking into combining them, or why just this amount now and not,
Sure.
like, what's the?
Right. So our thought process in setting this up is, again, there's a lot of unknowns in
Sure.
terms of what this
Yeah.
is. We thought that this was a fair amount to get us through the full year for all the costs that we have available. Our hope is that we are within this, and that'll start to build some reserves for CARTA. And so there was, the hope that there may not be as much of a need in a second year. Obviously, there's also been discussions about other corridors, right? And so we're looking at something that's very specific to YOLO 80 in the first year. And so we can revisit kind of how much money is available. As Matt well knows, like it could be a very much larger amount of money that's needed to set the program up once we have a consultant. And so for our first year, we wanted to do 1 year loan at 1 year costs.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's 400,000 and the interest is I just want to make sure I fully understand.
Sure.
We're not like paying a bank, we're paying SACOG.
So SACOG invests its money with the County of Sacramento as the treasurer. And so this is exactly the amount that we earn in interest in having this SACOG managed fund sit there. So instead of having it sit with Sacramento County, we're essentially saying, we'll give you a loan. SACOG is kind of made whole. There's no impact to members outside of the CARTA membership.
Got it.
It's a little bit of the cost of doing business, right? I think we kind of early on figured out that using Sac County for this service would, over the long term, be quite beneficial, and it absolutely will be. But that's the cost of doing business. That's where we are.
Yeah.
Taking money
So
to-
it's 1 year and it's 400,000 for that 1 year with the potential that, oh, good.
No,
perfect.
no. This is cumulative interest, assuming that this is by the time that toll revenues are available, 2028 or beyond,
Got
right?
it. Okay.
So no, this is compound interest over several years.
That actually makes
Correct.
complete sense.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Other comments or questions on the loan agreement? Now we need to move it forward. Motion, Sergio, second by Chapman. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. Thank you, Kathleen, for that one as well. Item 6, I'm gonna guess it's Kathleen.
Yes, thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair Villegas. So item 6 is also an action item to release a request for proposals for consulting services to develop a toll program and outline what CARTA's needs are between when we start construction on YOLO 80 this year and when we ultimately operate the toll lanes in what we think will be 2028. So included with your staff report is the full draft scope of work that we propose attaching to this request for proposals once it's released. That scope of work is divided into 5 tasks. The first is a project management task, sort of the general coordination of the consultant lead with the staffs of the partner agencies within CARTA to be able to keep the work moving forward. The second task looks at a system review. So really putting together a report that provides a comprehensive update of what are the planned toll lanes within our region or managed lanes projects? What is their current status? What are the types of improvements that are proposed within each of those facilities? And what's their timeline that they're working towards? Also some analysis of what's happening on our adjacent facilities in our neighboring regions. So like what Solano is doing on I-80 near us, what San Joaquin is thinking about south of us, if anything. So to be able to provide this board and the public sort of a comprehensive look of here's what we think the long range picture is for tolling in our region that will help inform a lot of the decisions that will be made under task 4 during policy development. So task 3 is really the piece that you all are asking for and the piece that we are asking for to be able to implement CARTA, which is what does a multi-year work plan for CARTA look like? What actions need to be taken at what points? Who makes those actions? How much do those actions cost so that we can put all of the pieces in place so that by the time we get to 2028, we have a working toll facility that benefits our region. So this will give us the ability to make good decisions about what our budgets should be in future years and where that revenue for those budgets should come from, understand how to coordinate with our partners. Task 4 looks at near-term policy development. This is also sometimes called toll policy and business rules. So there are a lot of decisions that this board needs to make to inform how YOLO 80 will ultimately be implemented. Things like what time of day the toll facility will operate at, who gets discounts and when. If we have an equity program, how does that equity program work? And all of those will need to ultimately go into a formal toll ordinance. So this work under Task 4 is to support the the CARTA board in making those decisions and getting the right integration with other partners who those decisions will impact. So certainly all of the current members of CARTA and the future members of CARTA for the other counties, but also our cities, other staff that are really deeply related to this work that we'll need to coordinate with in order for you all to make informed decisions on a timely manner to keep YOLO 80 on schedule. And then finally, Task 5 does some staffing support so that this consultant can be at CARTA board meetings and help prepare materials for you all, walk through those workshops. And so we as a region can also start to explore what a kind of consultant support of CARTA looks like. So that right now, SACOG is administering CARTA for the first year, and this will supplement that so we can think about what another type of staffing model might be. So this board can consider that for future years. If I could have the next slide. So really, if you think about this visually, we have this 1-year RFP, which is going to lay out a multi-year timeline. So on the top, I have kind of the RFP supporting staff services, and then we have YOLO 80 construction and operations. So we really need to understand, right now we have CARTA and we have YOLO 80 funded, which is excellent news that we're all very excited about. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen in between. So this RFP doesn't fund that work, but it tells us what the scope of that work needs to be so that this board can decide how it wants to fund staff, gets consulting services. So theoretically, there would be a lot of other contracts and RFPs that would come out of this work once we have a sense of what we need to do over the coming years. If I could have the next slide. Staff's recommendation is that the board delegates authority to the secretary, which is James Corliss, is currently serving as a secretary for CARTA to be able to release the RFP, select the final consultant, and negotiate and sign the contract. The reason that staff is recommending this delegation is to allow us to move in sort of the most timely manner, given when the cadence of upcoming CARTA board meetings are. So if you see on this black line at the bottom, I have the CARTA board meetings that you've just adopted as part of item 3. So we have the August meeting, but it's on August 1st. So should the board choose to take an alternate action and not delegate that authority for contract award, which is of course fully within your authority, then that item for approval of the selected consultant would not be able to come back until the October CARTA board meeting. So just slightly delays by a few months the ability to have the consultant on board doing work. So as I mentioned, staff recommendation is to delegate the authority to release the RFP, negotiate and sign with the selected consultant. Happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you for that. Kathleen, are there any initial questions by anybody at this juncture? Yes, sir. Matt, jump in.
Yeah, just a quick question for staff regarding task 4. Kathleen, you talk about CARTA will also likely have 2 other efforts happening under separate contract. an equity program framework, and a roadside toll system procurement. Can you just talk to me about the thinking behind having those separate activities, where are those happening, and where's the budget for them?
Yeah, so previously the YOLO Transportation District received a $2 million award from SACOG to conduct advanced planning specific to the YOLO 80 project. That scope of work included a lot of the work that's happened to date, including supporting the application that we did to the California Transportation Commission. But further scope of that work includes the development of an equity program and the procurement of roadside toll system. So the note in the scope of work is just to notify any potential bidders that there would need to be some coordination between YOLO TD and the contract that it's running as part of YOLO 80 and this contract with CARTA at the same time. I will say staff between the agencies have been having conversations around, where does that work best sit? And so that's an ongoing discussion that we bring back for some future consideration, but that's where the scopes currently sit between the two entities.
If I could have one follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just one follow-up to that, because we're talking about this work, talking about setting up things for the region. So relative to the equity, because there's going to be very specific equity requirements of YOLO 80 per the EIR and the commitments that you made last week relative to how equity might look on other corridors across the region, because equity can express itself very distinctly one corridor to one corridor to one corridor. So is there any concern about this equity work that's being contracted for the YOLO 80 work also occurring regionally, or is this just intended just for the YOLO 80 corridor?
That's a great question.
So there isn't concern. I think we've, as a region, noticed what you're reflecting on, which is that really we want a equity program that makes sense for the region and that is set up to work for other toll facilities that may come online in other counties of our region. And so the idea is that it makes more sense for CARTA potentially to ultimately implement the equity program. And so we're pursuing what it would look like to move that scope, but that's not currently happened and needs to be a larger discussion with the CARTA board around what the cost and tasks associated with developing an equity program are. And so this contract would set us up to be able to go out for something like that in the future. So all of the note under task 4 is just to reflect that that is not part of the scope of work of the $700,000 and that a selected bidder would need to coordinate regardless with who puts it out. But note certainly taken.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, man. I was going to actually ask exactly the same question, and I want to underscore the importance of that. I didn't know what the answer was going to be, but I do want to have further discussion around how do we tee that up so that this body is active in that space as we contemplate future expenditures and the equity program, and in addition to several others, but that we should be having that conversation. Okay, so are there any other questions at this point? I know that Executive Director Bernstein is here and wanted to speak on a couple of items. Let's see. So are there any other slips to speak, Robert, or is this the only one?
Just the one.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, well, this is, so thank you, Kathleen, for the item. I think, at least, and I'll just maybe start a little bit here. I think this begins to kind of chip away at what we talked about quite extensively at the SACOG board in terms of the tolling authority and, the potential and the prospects of future revenues and how they get, managed and what the composition of the governance body would look like and such. And I just, so I wanted to bring up, and I had the opportunity to talk a little bit with James about it, and that is, I think it would be, and we can discuss this, but I think it would be really helpful, given that this is the second meeting of this body, that we begin to kind of craft or frame kind of principal positions around how we think about the tolling. And thank you, Caltrans, for your estimates on kind of where we think things may go a couple years from now and then 2049 and everything in between. And there's a lot lots going to happen between now and then. But I think at its outset, just as a principal matter, and this is up for discussion, but I want to throw it out, is really maybe consider asking staff as part of this item in light of the fact that under a couple of different under the scope, task 3 and 4 speak to this and in terms of putting together kind of a work plan and associated costs, that we really also, in addition, ask staff to bring back a framework for how we lay out or what the principal positions are as it relates to expenditures in terms of how, whether or not it's new and expanded or whether it's something different than that, because there's going to be a lot of different components in the work plan. And the reason I think it's important that we clearly define it is because we need to be fully, I believe we need to be fully transparent around how we start talking about expenditures amongst ourselves, because we are just getting started with this conversation, but also for the public's edification. It needs to be perfectly, I believe, crystal clear that we as a governing body managing aspects of this operation as we get into tolling, it is going to get complicated very quickly if we don't begin to frame what the expenditures are used for. I know we had conversations around this, but I think it ought to be, at the risk of oversimplifying it, almost something that anybody could pick up and fully understand without a whole lot of translation, and certainly not, you know, in the legalese that we often speak, but super simplified around how and what the intended purpose of the toll revenues are going to be for. And there ought to be metrics that we use to determine whether or not we are actively engaging in that activity as a body. And I'm not trying to overstate it or be too Pollyannic around what the prospects of and how this may mature over the course of many years when all of us are gone. But I think at its outset, it really should be able to be very clear to the public around what our intentions are. And I'm sure everybody else has other thoughts around that. But before we ask Autumn, and part of the conversation, in fairness to Autumn, was that, and we had a brief conversation around this intended usage, because YOLO was kind of out of the gate first. YOLO TD, she's at the center of a lot of this, and there are going to be a lot of questions around it. So, unless there are other comments or questions at this point, what I'd like to do maybe is just have Autumn come forward and maybe address some of the concerns that were raised over the course of the last couple of weeks. So welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to be here. I do want to just start by taking responsibility for some comments that I made at a recent SACOG board meeting in April that I probably didn't do enough preparation from and was probably doing a little bit too much off the cuff, because we were talking about transit operations funding and what our deficits are for our existing service. And I wandered into talking about toll revenue, which I should not have done. So I just want to really be clear that, one, we have absolutely no plan to use toll revenue to fund any deficit or any existing service. In fact, it's very clear in the EIR that that's not a thing that can happen. It has to be for service expansions. And the EIR is very specific about that, and also about what specific service we are proposing to expand. And that is service that we have never run before. It is a level of service we have never run before. It's something we've wanted to do for a long time, but didn't have the funding to do. So I apologize for being confusing about that. And second, I want to be really clear that the EIR, while the EIR itself, the money that we received from the California Transportation Commission, funds that new service for 3 years out of those capital dollars. And the EIR says beyond that point, the CARTA board may decide at its discretion to continue those investments, but it is at your discretion. And of course, it depends on whether or not there even is any excess toll revenue. So I want to be really super clear about that, that while the EIR does say this is the service that will be funded for 3 years through the capital dollars, any funding for that service beyond that point is at the discretion of the CARTA board. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but again, happy to answer any questions. So I'll stop there with that. And then I did want to then follow up on the equity program conversation as well, because that's come up. It is very much in the scope of work for the money that we have, that we've been using so far and will continue to use to fund our efforts on YOLO 80. But we are very open to doing the equity program on a regional basis rather than just on a corridor basis. And really, I think it's at the discretion of our board for the funding we control and this board in terms of what your desires are and working that out. So we're very open to having that conversation. We have not procured for that work. The money is sitting there.
Public comment?
Thank you.
Autumn, did you want to finish that thought or?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you have 1 minute remaining.
I'm a rule follower. What can I say? Yes, we're very open to having that.
It's so funny.
We're open to having that conversation. The money is sitting there. We're not going to do anything about it without robust conversation with you and with the YOLO TD board.
Got it. Okay. Good. Thank you for that. All right. Okay. Thank you, Robert. Any other slips? Seeing none?
There's no other public comment.
Very good. Okay. So I'll bring it back for And I wanted to tee that up because I think that's a conversation worth having, and I have some ideas at the end if board's interested. So,
Mr. Chair, if I
Yeah.
can I mean, I appreciate that, and it does harken back, I think, to lots of the discussion you had at the SACOG board, right, in December and January. And we can and plan to bring forward to you, I mean, really kind of, I think we're in startup mode here, right? And so all of you and us need to understand what are the rules of the game? What are the parameters we're following? We had some discussion about the VMT mitigation plan for Yellow 80. Those will have to be followed in other corridors, right? So we will absolutely make sure that we are, as you get into the rules of the game and toll policy and expenditure of excess net revenue, right? What's already what's in play? What are the rules? And I think, as Autumn said, like, I don't think anybody's suggesting we backfill transit shortfalls with this. Really, what we're trying to do is move more people through these corridors, right? And through every means possible. And in some cases, and the good news on Yellow 80 is you've got transit service across the causeway and you've got parallel capital corridor. It's a perfect corridor to set up to move more people. That may not always be the case in some of these corridors. So this year, I believe, and I looked to Kathleen, who remembers the agendas and exactly what you're talking about when, but we have a managed lane system plan that Caltrans District 3 is working on. It looks at the regional network. You're going to be developing at the SACOG board the blueprint, the MTP SCS, which will have a managed lane network in it, right? So this is one piece of a larger puzzle, and appreciate the comments and beginning to frame this. Let's be transparent and make sure we understand. Yeah. We're going to bring more to you, I think, in terms of the sort of the underlying policies, rules, and all the rest of it. So stay tuned.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, James. And thank you, Autumn, for your comments. I mean, I think both on the excess revenue piece and on the equity piece. I mean, on the one hand, we want to make decisions that sets up YOLO 80 for success right away, but also establishes a framework that's going to work as a region, right? As this expands over the coming years. So appreciate your comments, and Mr. Chair, appreciate you raising the points, because I agree with you on us having to be very thoughtful and deliberate and sensitive about some of these issues.
So one of the things I appreciate, Chair, one, about your comment, and then two, just about budgets, transparency, and all of it after, a couple of years now of being elected. What can often happen with budgets is that they're hard for even us to understand, let alone someone off street to pick up and actually be able to fully understand where these dollars going, what are they going towards? And with that confusion comes a lack of trust. And I know during our December meeting, as well as the following meetings, even just our SACOG board, I think a lot of what we heard is we want to trust that you, YTD, you, YOLO, are going to do right by the entire region. And we're gonna go on a limb. And again, I remember Supervisor Desmond saying, like, okay, and so I think it's important, in addition to like appreciating James, Secretary James, for what you are saying regarding, like, we promise. Yes, the secretary.
We only have them for 10 hours on the contract.
I know.
That's right.
Wrap it up.
You're burning time. You're burning time. Those are billable minutes.
What you're saying in regards to, hey, we promise. But I also think it's important that, because there's only so many places that you can actually hear from us together and we can hear from each other, that we're clear about the importance of intentionality and transparency, and what in this consulting contract we will be hoping for and looking for, as we're then hopefully giving you authority to go off and do the thing. And I do think being able to have a document where we can clearly pick it up and easily read it. Pictures are always great. I like the waterfall. Would be very, very helpful. And again, in establishing trust, not only from the public, by the way, but also just amongst ourselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I think to maybe further expand, and then we eventually got to get back to the item in front of us to decide how we want to proceed. But I actually would suggest, at the risk of oversimplifying it, even just start to put together an onboarding binder, because we've already in one meeting have a new member. And this is going to move very quickly. And so if we don't have a way to sort of onboard somebody with all the documents, and many of us wear multiple hats, coming in. There ought to be one place where we can go to see what the bylaws are, what the composition representation is, because it's confusing for those who are experiencing for the first time, the budget, the conflict of interest, and certainly the expenditure plan and sort of the intentions and the components that are in state law around those areas, so that there's one place to go to as an onboarding document for any new members, or frankly, for the member of the public who wants to understand what are the rules of how we are engaging in this process. So I'd love to see something like that as part of the, whether it's the consultant that helps put it together over the course of the next several months, and certainly having by somebody on board by August wouldn't be too late. So, okay, so the staff's recommendation in here, do we want to delegate, or are we comfortable? Are we comfortable delegating to the secretary to move forward as proposed by staff, or want to come back to this body? What's the preference? We have a recommendation to delegate it and let secretary take care of business and come back hopefully with a consultant by August.
I have
Yes, sir.
just a question. I myself am good delegating. Just a question is, the team that's gonna help choose the consultant, is that gonna be composed of team members from these agencies, SACOG? What's that team membership gonna look like? That's a good question.
So the proposal from staff is to offer participation to all of the current and future members of CARTA. So that would be SACOG, YOLO TD, Caltrans District 3, STA, PCTPA, and EDCTC. All of those entities might not have the capacity or interest to participate at that time. We recognize that, but we'll certainly be offering it up.
Okay, thank you.
Other thoughts?
Early moves, okay, no? You wanna
I
say
just say
something,
Supervisor
Secretary?
Desmond loves sitting on consultant review.
He learned his lesson.
I saw him lean back.
No,
He
no,
doesn't
no,
want
no,
no
no,
more.
no.
He's like, no parts.
But I will second the motion to approve.
All right.
Yes.
All right, so.
Early moves.
All right, so if no other comments, no other public testimony.
No other public
Early-
comment.
Early moves, does in seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that one. And then item 7 is the conflict of interest code. Kathleen as well? No, that's got.
I can get that one, Chair.
Okay, Mike, very good.
This is Mike Mauer, General Counsel. This is just really a procedural box to check. Every public agency is required to do a conflict of interest code. You have to do it within 180 days of formation. It's a FPPC requirement, a requirement under the Political Reform Act. And basically what the conflict of interest code is it's what designates which employees have to fill out a Form 700. This is about the most simple conflict of interest code you'll ever see, because CARTA has no employees, and there's an FPPC regulation that says if you're doing work for 2 agencies, you don't have to file a conflict of interest. You don't have to file duplicative Form 700s. So basically, we don't have to list any of the SACOG staff in here, which is why you don't see me, James, Eric, Kathleen, any of our positions listed in here. The board automatically has to do it. So really the only position that we have listed is future consultants that may come on, that may qualify to have to fill out a Form 700. So we have to do it. We have to have it in place. We followed the procedures to start it. And at this point, it's really just checking a box so we can tell the FPPC we've done it. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we'd be looking for approval from the board.
All right. Any registered comments on that one, Rob?
There's no public comment.
No public comment. All right. So we have the code before us, looking for action to approve. Are there any questions?
Early moves to approve.
Moves to approve, and Chapman seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously as well, and that's item 7. And then receive and file item 8, which is the Joint Powers Authority formation activities.
Mr. Chair, this is just for your information. So at each CARTA board meeting, staff provide a memo updating you on how we're chipping away at the required activities to make CARTA into a fully formed JPA, one of which we just achieved by formally adopting a conflict of interest code. So different steps and where we're at are included in the attachment.
Okay. Right. Any questions on that item? It's receive and file only. Right. And then, so that is it for the formal agenda. There was this little meeting that took place in Southern California last Thursday, and I just wondered if anybody wanted to chime in at all on in summary what happened. James, did you want to chat it out or anybody else want to?
I wasn't even there. I was here.
I
So I
know
think
you
somebody
were-
who was there.
But I
should-
know you know exactly what happened. That's what- Yeah. Kathleen? or-
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Kathleen,
Yeah,
you were
he was
there.
Sure. I was going to wait to see if Director Aceves wanted to start, but I'll kick us off.
Yeah.
So we led a multi-agency coalition down to Orange County, including many folks in this room, and we're able to successfully receive unanimous approval on all 4 action items related to YOLO 80 at the California Transportation Commission's meeting down there last week. This was a monumental lift, both to prep all the materials to even get those actions on the agenda and also to do all of the work to convince them that saying yes was a good idea for our region. So everyone in this room and many folks who are not are to thank for this incredible achievement. As far as I know from Director Aceves' team, this not only puts us on schedule to get the project delivered without a penalty in time, but also really puts us in a good position to be achieving a lot of equity and sustainability goals. The commissioners were effusive about this project, not sort of just saying yes because they felt like they had to or anything like that. A lot of support that this project checks all the boxes. This is an all of the above project. This is the type of blend we want to see coming in the post-CAPTI era. So really an incredible achievement. And then special shout out to YOLO Transportation District and Autumn Bernstein's incredible work for many years to even get it to the point where I and other partners started to get involved. And also, of course, to the Caltrans District 3 team who came up with the idea to help solve this many, many years ago.
So, yeah, if I may, first of all, thank you, Kathleen, for those words, and thank you and Autumn again, and SACOG, YOLO TD, and all our partners. It was really a joint effort. So I want to stress that there's nothing we can do on a vacuum. We all need to work together, and this project is really testament to that. So it was a tremendous push. It was a huge lift, but this was a good project. This is a good project, and we truly believe on it. I can tell you our staff worked tirelessly, and they are excited. They're exhilarated. I've never seen them so excited to get to where we are. And we're really looking forward to move this project forward. I can tell you the commission, back to what Kathleen was saying, in some cases they were saying this project, from the commitments of possibly extending mitigation, what we're doing with putting efforts in the transit side to mitigate VMT is a gold standard. Those were their words, literally. They were saying this is a project that can be viewed as a gold standard for these types of projects. Other than that, so again, very thankful and appreciative, and just we were extremely happy at the end of those 4 votes. Back to the project itself to provide just an update to everybody. Right now, we're looking at obviously getting the co-op signed with YOLO TD to secure those. That's priority number 1. For schedule purposes, we are moving forward with advertising the project. Right now, we're looking at advertising it June the 10th is what we're looking at. That's when I'm going to advertise. Bid open late July, early August, award early September. And that'll be with plenty of time for us to enable us to secure all the infra funds. And then from there in the fall, begin the preliminary administrative work and construction this winter and or next spring as weather allows. But yeah, it was great and an amazing experience last week at the CTC. Thank you, Chair, for allowing us to.
Absolutely. Thank you. And please, on behalf of the rest of the board, we share the enthusiasm that your staff had for the project. So, and I think it was one of the projects where it's rare that, oftentimes people vote on these projects, they don't know exactly where the project is located. I think almost every single person who testified at the end summarized by saying, and I personally have been stuck in that traffic. I mean, so it was a very personal thing for all those who testified. So I think that helps. All right. Any other comments on that? If not, then that takes care of our formal business. James, nothing to add?
Just know June 10th is your next meeting, and yeah, look forward to seeing you then.
Very good. Okay. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.